Hi, everyone. I'm Maggie McGrath, senior editor at Forbes. 1 year ago today, bone dry grounds paired with hurricane force winds to fan the flames of multiple fires in LA County. These fires would go on to burn some 40,000 acres of land, destroying thousands of homes and businesses and killing 31 people. Jennifer Mitchell is one of the thousands of homeowners who lost her house in those fires. She also happens to be the president of CBS Stations. So in the midst of tremendous personal devastation, Jennifer was tasked with delivering a week's worth of nearly nonstop live news, nearly 130 hours of live reporting over the course of 1 week. Jennifer joins us now to share her reflections on the fires 1 year later. Jennifer, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Maggie.
How are you? This past year has to have been one of the most difficult of your life. How are you holding up?
Thank you for asking. It has been one of the most challenging years, both personally and professionally, with the 2025 kicking off with the fires. But we're hanging in there, and today is a pretty special day for me and my son as we reflect upon how much we've overcome and where we are today versus where we were on January 7th, 2025.
And earlier today, you went to a remembrance. What should people understand about what you saw today, how the people of your neighborhood came together, and how you are perhaps still connected 1 year later?
Yeah, absolutely. The Palisades, which is where my home was always a very special, tight-knit community within the Los Angeles area. Even though people's zip codes have changed, that tight-knit community continues. And it was really nice driving up and parking and seeing the volume of people who were coming in to just stand together and remember together and reflect together. It was a nice moment this morning, and it was a great way to start the day.
As you reflect on what happened a year ago, what is standing out to you now? Do you have a specific moment that you think on, the moment you heard the news, the moment you saw a flash of fire? Is there something that stands above the rest as you look back to that day 1 year ago?
I think it's important just to give a little bit of context about that day. I happened to be in my role at our station in Pittsburgh, KDKA. So I was traveling and my son was at school. And I got word from my son for the first time, called me from school and said, Mom, there's a fire burning in the Palisades and it looks like it's getting very close to our home. And the school is telling us that we should evacuate and go back to our homes and grab what we can. It was very chaotic. I was at the station. I was supposed to be there for another couple of days. So as you can imagine, I went into a bit of a panic mode, and just trying to figure out, okay, I need to get home, need to get to my hotel, need to get to the airport on the next flight. It's an understatement to say that it was one of the worst flights I've ever been on because it was about another 3 hours before I could get on the plane, another 5.5 before I landed in LA. And by that time, we did not confirm or know, but we had imagined that our home was lost. In the meantime, my son was alone driving back from school, on the phone with me as I was at the airport saying, Mom, I'm going to grab our emergency kit, our documents, all of the stuff. I'm going to grab jewelry. I'm going to grab my special stuff. He got about a mile from the home, and it was such a chaotic evacuation situation that they turned him away. And he was in the midst of the flames, and he was terrified. And then the mission at that point was just to get out of the area. So we never got anything out of the home. We only had what we had with us. So he had his car and his backpack and his lacrosse bag. And I had my suitcase that I had with me in Pittsburgh. And I'll never forget that day. I will never forget that day. And what I will tell you is that my son, once he got out and I knew he was safe, he came here to the station. He came here to CBS LA. Being a Palisades resident, he knew the area better than anybody else in this newsroom. And while he waited for me to land, he sat in the newsroom with our news team. He sat on the assignment desk and he was helping to provide information about the geography, about the neighborhoods. And I think I'll never forget that moment, the kindness of our family, because I do believe the CBS stations have very much a family culture. And they were able to stay with him. He was able to help them in those moments until I landed.
It's the epitome of local journalism, which we see so little of these days, but it's that on the ground, specific local knowledge and expertise that he was able to give, even though not a professional journalist, but it informed the coverage. Now, on the subject of the journalism that you produced that week, I have to ask, journalists are so often asked to be objective, but it's your own home, it's your neighborhood at the center of this news story. How did you manage as a professional, which you had to be, but also knowing that your life was not going to look the same when the news story ended?
It was a bit of living a dual reality in many ways. In one moment, I was a mom, I was packing bags, I was looking for a hotel, I was trying to figure out where are we going to be tomorrow, the next day. But at the same time, I was leaning on our newsroom to provide the best coverage of this moment in Los Angeles that I knew personally our communities needed. And that is what we do. We are here to serve our communities. But when you find yourself on the other side of it, I needed the information just like every other person in the Altadena and the Palisades fires who became victims overnight or in that day. And so I looked at things through a bit of a different lens. And I think I was able to provide some context to my colleagues in our newsroom about what people were feeling in that moment, what information they needed in that moment. And I think that was helpful for all. But I had to do both. I had to be the mom and make sure that my family was okay. And I also had to make sure that my teams were okay because I was not the only one in this situation. We had people in our newsroom who also lost their home, but also many were evacuated because they were in areas where potentially the fire could have jumped to. So everyone was living in this really intense, chaotic moment of uncertainty.
Tremendous amount of uncertainty. I remember following it from the East Coast and feeling so helpless. And I wonder, because as a New Yorker, after the fires died down, I was seeing fewer and fewer headlines, fewer and fewer updates about the recovery, the cleanup, the recovery, what came next. So with 1 year in between the first flames and now, what do you most want people to know and understand about the days and weeks that followed the initial fires?
Yeah. Well, one thing I want to say about that is that we never took our foot off the gas in terms of coverage. We have stayed in these communities. We created Rebuilding Southern California. I made a commitment to stay with the story, to stay with these communities, to follow the progress or lack thereof, the challenges that everyone was facing as it relates to insurance and permits and rebuilding, donation centers, what do people still need? I mean, those were the real challenges. And that's, I think, part of if you weren't watching, those moments in those weeks after were sometimes harder than the moments immediately after, right? You have a lot of adrenaline happening. You're in crisis mode. You're figuring things out in real time. But reality starts to set in 2, 3, 4 weeks after. Like, this is the new reality. Our home is lost. Our belongings are all lost. Everyone going through this at the same time. How do we cut through the red tape? Where do we go? Where do we go to find out how to get a new passport, get a new birth certificate, replace my social security card? All of those things that we take for granted every day because we carry them around in our purses or our pockets and they're in our homes. Those were the real challenges. And so you were on this wheel of there's always a to-do list. Every day there was a to-do list, and it felt impossible to ever get through it. And I'll tell
Mm.
you, my to-do list still exists. It's not all done. And that's the case for all of the fire victims.
Now, you were in temporary housing for quite a while. Have you found a new home? Have you rebuilt? What is the status
Yeah.
of your family?
So we lived in three different temporary homes for the first month. So we moved around a lot and we literally had bags, just a few bags in a suitcase with us. And then we relocated a bit south for 7 months, also in a temporary furnished place until we could really figure out where we wanted to be. And ultimately, we decided we want to be back in the Palisades. So in August, my son and I moved back to the Palisades to part of the area that's not as devastated. Um, but we really wanted to feel that sense of home and community. And we had lived there since 2014. And um, the day we moved back there, we both felt this sense of home and comfort and relief to be back in the familiar surroundings of where we had been living, despite it not being what it was.
And on that note, you mentioned progress or lack thereof. Standing now in January 2026, how would you characterize the rebuilding effort? What has been accomplished and what remains to be done?
It's slow. It's very, very slow. Um, I was just driving through there because I drive through there every day, but I don't really drive through in the evening. And last night I had to go to CVS, which is opened. There's only a few businesses opened. CVS is opened. Um, the Garden Cafe is open, which is where all of the kids in the Palisades would go to have their after school snack and after Little League games. A couple of other restaurants, a dry cleaner. But when you drive through there in the dark, it's very eerie still. There's very little light, with the exception of some people's whose homes were spared. And there were some homes spared. And people have moved back for a variety of reasons. Some because of the reasons I did. But there was a long period of time where people couldn't move back because there had to be an immense amount of remediation done and repairs done on homes and make it safe to live in. But you can see some very sporadic lights around as you drive through the main drag, which is on Sunset Boulevard, that you see. A lot remains to be done. And, many of my friends and who are in the process of going through everything, it's a very slow process in terms of getting permits approved and getting construction started. Um, and so it's going to be a long journey.
Who do you hold accountable for the slowness? If there's anyone you would want to be watching this right now, is there a single elected representative who you would say, hey, pick up the pace?
In any situation like this, the mayor of the city and the governor of the state, it's part of their responsibility to, provide answers and to help the fire victims through the rebuilding process.
Now, professionally, as a journalist, you talked about how in those days, immediately after the fires, you're balancing this concern for your family, for your life, with your professional responsibility to tell the story. Has that experience shaped the way you've approached additional and other news events and disasters and devastations?
It really has. In these moments, there is no playbook. There is no playbook on how to cover these events and how to lead a team through such a moment where you have to keep yourself together and cover this horrific story, all while living through it yourself or knowing someone who is living through it. I really credit the leadership of all of our stations for the work that they did. You talked about it a little bit. We had 130 hours of continuous coverage in that first week. That's an incredible feat, incredible feat. And the culture at CBS stations, which we've really worked over the past 4.5 years to build and cultivate, came to light in this particular moment. It wasn't us calling our other stations around the country and asking for help. they were picking up the phone saying, how can we help? Who can we send? They knew that there was going to be fatigue and exhaustion by our crews and our reporters and our anchors. There was. So everybody from all 14 at the time, we now have 15 stations from across the country, sent in crews, sent in reporters for relief for our people so that they could at least get some rest. That is now something that we are doing whenever we have a big, massive breaking news story that we know is going to go on for days and weeks and months in any of our markets. We come in and we help support each other. And I think that speaks to the family culture that we've built here.
That's smart. It strengthens the newsroom, it strengthens your coverage, and it both in the moment and ongoing.
And we really, and the people that came in, many of whom, they raised their hands. They had ties to LA for whatever reason. They were born here, they have family members here, they knew enough about the area that they just wanted to help. And after all of that, many of them called me or emailed me and said, thank you for the opportunity to be able to come to LA to help, because people felt helpless. People wanted to do anything that they could to help in some way, and it was gratifying to them.
I remember following people who live in LA, public figures who I've covered, who were sharing individual GoFundMe campaigns and just donating to those. Obviously, 1 year out, a tremendous amount of work in rebuilding remains. Are there charitable organizations that you would point to for folks who are watching and who, like me, felt so helpless last year and still have resources to give? Are there one or two that you would point to?
I mean, we partnered with the American Red Cross and had a very successful fundraising campaign, raised $800,000 under our Rebuilding SoCal. That is an organization that has been tremendously helpful to our communities here. I'll tell you, one of the things that really struck me, particularly in the beginning, but even now, and over the holidays, I realized this as well. All of the small businesses, even large businesses, brands who came forward to offer assistance, to offer discounts to people who were left with nothing, was really, I think, unprecedented in many ways. The donation centers that were stood up to help people was incredible. I know I can only speak for myself, but I never imagined that I would find myself in a donation center on January 8th of 2025. But there I was, looking at just getting some sweatpants and a sweatshirt and a coat and toothpaste and deodorant. I mean, those were the essentials. And organizations that continue to work on that, I think, are the ones that in the next crisis, right? Those are the ones that I think that were the most helpful in those moments right after the fires.
Jennifer Mitchell, president of CBS Stations, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your reflections 1 year out from the LA fires, and we wish you the best in the continued recovery of your neighborhood.
Thank you, Maggie.